Hi, so I want to ask a question, just to make sure that we're all starting on a similar page, and feel free to answer it by raising your hand or internally. Have you ever gone with the status quo and realized at some point that how you were presenting yourself didn't feel right? Yeah. I'm sure that we've all succumbed to behavior we probably wouldn't have gone with if it hadn't become so common. Maybe even wondered why others weren't going along with you. And this is pretty valid when we learn to understand that difference isn't always a negative thing. But what can happen when, instead of trying to understand other perspectives or identities, people in power create harmful ideologies in order to force others not to speak about differences at all? For many people in the LGBTQ community, it is an automatic response to hide our true gender or sexuality soon after coming to terms with it. This act can often be described using a metaphor like the closet. When somebody considers themselves closeted, it typically means they haven't disclosed their true gender or sexuality to those around them. A prominent reason why many people are in the closet in the first place is because being LGBTQ can be seen as out of the ordinary. The idea that being straight is the better or the only normal sexual orientation is known as heteronormativity. The word was popularized by Michael Warner in the 90s, with inspiration from other queer essayists like Adrienne Rich and Gail Rubin. It sounds like a tough word, but it's really the terms hetero, meaning attraction to a different sex or gender, and normative, like typical behavior. Today, many add the term cis to the beginning of the word to emphasize how people are often also assumed to identify as cisgender, the gender somebody is assigned at birth, and identifies either male or female. Everybody has internalized this concept throughout their lives, whether it was by assuming someone was in a heterosexual relationship right off the bat, or creating an idea of somebody's gender in your mind based off the way they look. Think back to my first question, and notice how going with the status quo is similar to living in a cis heteronormative society as an LGBTQ person. I want you to think about the impact that has on somebody, especially from a young age, since studies show that many people who are LGBT realize they are not straight or cisgender around the age of 12. Now, this is not the end-all be-all. Challenging these beliefs and putting in an effort to support LGBTQ people from a young age is an act of defiance against cis heteronormativity. For example, I was lucky enough to have a prominent ally in my life from the beginning, my mom. From a young age, she and my extended family made it clear they would accept me no matter what, and they wanted me to grow up with an open mind. Since this kind of support helped me see how wanting to further understand a world outside of a cis heteronormative lens and wanting to further acceptance is such an easy way to create a safe space in friend groups and family circles, and can inspire other LGBTQ kids to do the same. Because of this support, I was a lot more open with my mom when I was ready to I was queer. Unfortunately, many youth and adults cannot come out of the closet because they will not be accepted by their friends or family and have a fear of discrimination in school, at the workplace, or in the healthcare system. LGBTQ human rights are challenged daily all over the world, as being openly gay or trans is cause for imprisonment and in some situations even execution in around 70 different countries across the globe. While in the United States there are laws preventing criminalization for being LGBTQ, there are so many problems within our legislation. 2021 was one of the worst years for anti-LGBTQ legislation, as by the month of May, 16 bills have been enacted into law, and so many more have been introduced across the country, and we can see how these bills bleed in 2022 as well. The scariest part? Many of these bills target transgender youth specifically. Legislation like this is how people in power are able to instill fear in the LGBTQ community starting from a young age. Due to these laws, how we interact with our peers, social institutions, and much more, completely eradicating cis heteronormativity will take time and effort. Queer activists and allies have been putting in this effort for centuries, defying cis heteronormativity and systems of oppression to work towards queer liberation so nobody has to hide their identity. If we continue the work today and challenge this incorrect assumption that everyone can align into some kind of binary, it will have lasting effects going into the future. How can we do this, though? Well, a good place to start is thinking about personal biases or beliefs somebody could have towards the LGBTQ community. I found that people tend to make jokes about these situations to hide the fact that they're uncomfortable or don't really know much about us. Questions I would ask somebody uncovering their own beliefs is, why does this make you uncomfortable? And if there's a reason, where does it come from? Are queer relationships and identities really weird, or have we just been conditioned from a young age to believe that they are? And of course, no change would happen if we did not continue to act and speak our truths. Talk about LGBTQ issues and causes with anybody who will listen. It is a dialogue that should not be suppressed, because it's a dialogue that queer people have constantly. Now, of course, in situations where a LGBT person is in possibly violent contact with queerphobia, prioritizing safety is a big deal, especially in situations with minors. So those unsure how their community will react to their identity can start small by talking with a group of trusting people first. And allies, help destigmatize these conversations by having your own. And that does include reminding non-LGBT peers that things like homophobic and transphobic jokes may actually do more harm than we think, as they can contribute to the belittling and the dehumanization of the LGBTQ community. Listen and offer support to LGBT friends. You can show up for the LGBTQ community at protests or help your queer friends when faced with discrimination. It may seem like a certain environment is a comfortable space for people who are LGBTQ, but think about it. Are the people in said environment willing to unlearn negative assumptions towards any marginalized community? If negative assumptions or stereotypes are normalized within a community, they can be hard to get rid of. But it's just a reminder that simply having a safe space sticker on a wall won't stop people in that room from saying offensive phrases. As long as people are forced to hide a part of who they are in order to protect themselves, our society will be tolerating fear and discrimination. When we stand by and allow those who are hypnotized by things like cis heteronormativity create rules for us to follow, it completely eradicates the voices of those who have lived experience of the same old intolerance, which is why it is more critical now than ever to safe spaces for those in the LGBTQ community, especially young people, because there is no age too young to know your identity. The whole point of growing up is to figure yourself out, make friends, and take risks, even if it all seems difficult. There's a future where nobody has to conform to an image somebody else created for them, a future where people are free to be who they are without fear, and a future where there are no more walls constraining anyone's identity in place. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.